Well, why don't we start with adopting the minutes from last time and I'll let my.
Well, we'll let him start. his-
We want to call meeting to order first. We'll go that route.
We have to let the public in.
Yeah.
Whenever you're ready.
Okay. Okay, I'm Dave Harris, calling the June 11th, 2025 Fiscal Advisory Board Committee meeting to order for room 207 in City Hall. Jessica, could you do the call of order, please?
Sure. Let's see. Committee member Paris. Okay, committee member Clore,
Yes.
Here.
committee member Mays. Here. Committee member Hunter,
Here.
committee member Hancock,
Here.
and we are missing committee member Reitke and committee member Byfield.
Yes. Okay. Okay, open for public comment. I see no public in the committee as far as I'm sure. Are there any scheduled to come that we're aware of?
Nothing that came to me beforehand.
Okay.
Any on Zoom?
We don't have anybody on Zoom but Suzanne Ross Mantle, who's one of our staff.
Oh, okay.
Okay, approval of previous minutes.
I move approval.
Okay.
Second.
First and second, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Passed. Reports. Move right to Lane. Thank you very much, sir.
Yes. Share my. Okay, well, nice to see some of you again. We had a study session 2 weeks ago. And that was pretty in depth. So tonight it's gonna be a lot of information, but nothing really in depth. So if you want to stop me at any point to ask questions, to go into more detail, just interrupt me. I won't be offended. So I thought tonight we would discuss 4 topics. The first is bond financing. The second one is the CalPERS Fresh Start program. The third is the proposed budget, but we're mainly looking at like grand totals. So total revenues, total expenditures, and the effect on reserves. And then finally, I'd like to essentially schedule out the whole fiscal year. My goal is to identify 4 meeting dates. And I have some potential themes for those meetings. So we'll go on, essentially at that part of the presentation, we'll be taking notes and then we'll send out something later next week to either meeting appointments or things of that nature. So to begin, section 1, bond financing. So the city historically has issued bonds. When we're looking at the city overall, we have really 3 main operations. We have our general fund. The general fund collects taxes. We use those tax dollars to fund things like police and fire and planning, parks and rec. These are operations that typically don't generate much revenue because what they do is more of a public good. The 2 large operations aside from the general fund are the water and wastewater utilities. These operations clearly generate revenues that pay for their activities, and it's pretty standard to see the utilities issue debt because a lot of times we have major projects at the treatment plant or we're replacing pipes underground. Sometimes those projects can be millions of dollars, and we usually don't have the financial capacity to pay for projects of a certain size. It's been a while since we issued debt. We did a refunding bond a couple years ago, but that essentially is just refinancing debt we've already incurred. The last time we issued a major bond, I believe was 2013, and that paid for the Martin Slough connection. So what that was upgrading the size of the sewer line to incorporate development in the county around or around HCSD or Cutton. So it's been a while since we have sought after outside financing. So today we're actually looking at not one, but two different financing packages, one from the general fund and then one from our wastewater fund. How do we identify what needs to be financed? Typically that happens when the engineers or the public works department puts together the annual CIP. So what this document is essentially a list of all the capital projects that the city intends to do over the course of, let's say, 5 years. We use this document for budgeting and also forecasting. So what the engineers have put in this document, not just this year, but over the past couple of years, have been some major facility improvements. The first one is the development of a new courtyard. So the current courtyard is adjacent to Costco, which is a great location. You can get right on the highway, but unfortunately it's within the tsunami zone, which is a bad place to store all your major equipment. So for over the past, let's say 3 or 4 years, we've been looking for sites to essentially develop a new courtyard. The courtyard serves not just the general fund, but the water and water systems. So it's really a combination of our police department, fire department, streets crew, and water and wastewater crew. We're also looking to improve City Hall. This building, has been in need of some major projects. The big ones are essentially replaced or upgrading the HVAC system. A lot of our offices, you can't control the temp. In some sides of the building where you don't get much sun, it can be very cold. On other sides, it's like a greenhouse. The way this building was built is that the outside of the building, what's called a curtain wall, is essentially part of the HVAC system. It's what contains the air inside. A lot of it was custom made, so we were unable to replace windows. So things like that, plus the elevator, plus some interior improvements, we're looking at roughly $5 million just for the City Hall project. And then the third one.
How old is the building?
I believe it was built in 1959. And the third project is the municipal auditorium. So if you know the history about the Muni, it was originally a school hall. I think it was built in 1902, or it's that old. And then during the 1930s, we got money from the federal government to build out the auditorium. So it's been in our possession, for over 100 years. And it's in 2010, we had a major earthquake and we got money from the feds to retrofit it. So it is seismically sound. But there's all this space on the school side. It's called the Winship School. And it's currently in City Hall. We have a lot of situations where we have multiple staff in one office. And the first thought was, well, we can build out the courtyard to incorporate the growth in staff. But we decided, because that would add to the cost of the courtyard, that we were better off taking a building that we already owned that needed work and doing the improvements to that building, because one, it would be nice to make that building shine. It could use a little work. And two, we were going to have to do work on that building anyways. So we really looked at it as an opportunity to cut costs, but also to address our deferred maintenance needs. So the courtyard, if you're not familiar, so here's Lost Coast Brewery and Pearson's. So we purchased a piece of land from the cemetery. It's about 5 acres right here. So that will be the location of a new courtyard.
I was going to ask you, how high do you have to be out of the tsunami zone? Is that That's higher,
Yeah, it's off, it's either distance from the bay or elevation.
or elevation, okay,
Um. Yeah, it's.
okay. So,
So the first thing we did was purchase the piece of land, and then we hired an architect to give us some conceptual designs. This was the first one. This came back with a price tag of $36 million. So ultimately, the end result won't look like this. It'll be similar. I believe it'll only be one building. It'll be roughly the same footprint as the current courtyard, so we're not losing space. But there will be additional space in these covered areas to hold all of our equipment. So people are, the crews are very excited to see this get built.
So what is the proposed,
We're trying to hold this project to about 21 million. That's our goal. Right now it's fairly difficult just with the inflation, other things, but we think we can get within that goal.
is it easier for us to interrupt you as you go along? Or would you like us to come back? Is it easier for us to hold our questions?
No, I like the questions.
Okay, very good.
Yeah.
and I do have one. The other location, will you try to sell it or are you gonna hold on to it?
So luckily, Costco is interested. So we're in discussions with Costco. They think they might use it as a parking lot at first.
Oh,
They might move their gas station over, or they might expand the store. But we're talking,
okay, that's good.
5+ years for to see something.
They'll get some money back.
I guess my question is, maybe citizens are listening too, is that if Costco can build right next door to the old Public Works Department, but yet they're not, I guess, concerned about the low water area, but yet we are now. What's happened there? Are we gonna keep that property or try and sell it to Costco? And don't we have a liability there as well, knowing that it's in an area that, I guess my question is it going to, do we have to get it passed by coastal commission before we can sell it, or is that just brought up to the?
So what the planning department does in this situation is, in order to sell or even lease property or city-owned property, you have to take it to the planning commission, who took our council chambers tonight.
Right?
And if they approve it, then you then have to go to other government agencies. So they're the first ones that get the option to buy or lease. And if they're not interested, then you can go out to the private market. So we've gone through all those steps. In terms of liability, if they were to lease the property, they retain or they assume liability. Right now, what they're doing is actually looking at the site to determine if there's any red flags. Did I cover everything?
Yeah, I guess I'm going back to the issue of the coastal commission. Coastal Commission allowed Costco to build where they're at, but yet now we've determined that it's it's a tsunami area, so we're gonna move, but why is there, I'm not hearing why we don't have a problem with building there. Why don't we build our new building there since we already own it? Are we moving strictly because of the fact that it's a low water area, but yet Costco built there just less than 20 years ago?
It's more of if there is a major event in tsunami,
Right.
it would take out a lot of our heavy equipment that would be mobilized to help with disaster cleanup. So it's been part of our emergency operation plan.
Okay, it's more of our plan than,
Yeah, it's
There.
more, it's not their
Okay.
plan, they're not offering us enough money for that. But yeah, and in terms of their development on that site, within the coastal zone, you can do retail
okay.
and the coastal commission loves parking lot, believe it or not. It's,
Next question, the 21 million, so where is that? Is that all grant? Or is that meat,
that's gonna be, we're gonna use the bonds
the bond,
to pay for that.
the whole bond?
So there's gonna be, so the plan is to issue $32 million. Um, 21 would be for the courtyard, or what we're calling the ops complex. About 5.5 million for City Hall, and then about 5.5 million for the Muni.
Okay, I was ahead of you. Sorry, I understand.
No, this one is, we're pretty far into the plans. These two just went out for RFP for just design or conceptual design. So this number is pretty strong in terms of our estimate. These two numbers might get adjusted in the future.
As it relates to the city hall proposal, are we actually covering parking with that? Is that? No, okay, so it's on-street parking for any visitors or employees.
Correct.
So is there any indication as to what's happening with the property next door, right next to us? As far as-
So that one is owned by Security National.
Right,
One behind us will be housing eventually.
okay,
The whole 5.5 million is mainly just to deal with those, the
Right.
HVAC and the elevator. We're not gonna make
but
it,
as a city of Eureka, we're obligating other businesses that come into our area, downtown and Old Town, to have parking available before they can in fact increase their business or have a business, but yet City of Eureka is not under that same obligation, because obviously we're taking a lot of parking away from this, because we're gonna be building this housing right next door.
Do we have parking minimums? I don't know if we have parking minimums anymore.
we do have parking
Yeah, we do,
minimums.
yeah.
Yeah, we do for businesses.
For businesses and for
When we
business.
updated the housing element, the general plan and the zoning code.
Mhm.
This was 2017, 18.
Right,
We changed the parking regulations.
Okay.
It's very easy to build without the
obligation of parking,
yes. Problem is that the city can only approve zoning changes within or outside of the coastal zone.
Okay.
So everything within the coastal zone, in order to change the zoning laws in the coastal zone, you have to get approval by the coastal commission. This can take a decade, so we're currently in that process, but I'd say our parking regulations have been greatly downsized. So there's a lot of ways for businesses who want to build
okay.
to avoid having the parking
So
requirements.
what are we gonna be doing for our employees that are now no longer gonna be having this lot after that expansion takes place?
They're gonna have to find space on the. Or take the bus.
They'll have to expand out into the residential district and park in front of other people's houses.
Yeah, and that's,
Okay,
Or ride their bikes.
gotcha.
um,
I read you.
and then for the Muni, the Muni will need an elevator for ADA compliance. It will also need quite a bit of interior improvements because so little has been done to that building over the years. And we plan to relocate some operations within City Hall to Muni, but only operations that are not public serving. So we want to maintain all of our services or all of our public face-to-face public interactions within City Hall so that we're not sending people to different spots.
That'll help with some parking.
Yeah,
but
that's
not-
just what
yeah.
I was thinking, yeah, because you'll have more parking over at the end.
Exactly, yeah. So overall, if we issue $32 million of debt, the annual payment would be about $2 million. That would be split between the three major operations. The general fund would capture about 900,000 per year. The waterfront and the wastewater fund should have been named, about $500,000 per year. And that's because when you look at the different buildings, they contain different ratios of employees who work in these different operations. Oh, let me go back. So there is lease revenue bonds are unique. Because they're structured in a way that allows the city or allows the general fund to issue debt just like a utility. So what happens is, the city and a JPA, and the JPA in this case is the Eureka Public Financing Authority. It was created during redevelopment. So essentially, the redevelopment agency needed another government entity, even though it's the same board, to issue the debt on their behalf. So in this case, the general fund is leasing the properties to the EPFA. And then the EPFA is then renting those properties to the city. The city pays a rent, and those rents are used to pay the debt service. So it's a pretty interesting financing tool. But I thought I would point that out.
So we can just issue that debt, we don't have to go to the voters or anything?
In this case, yeah, you don't have to go to the voters.
Okay.
So if you decided you wanted to go to the voters, that would be called a general obligation bond.
Okay.
And that would require, I believe, 2/3 vote. About 80% of the debt issued by cities in California are going to be your lease revenue bond. And a lot of times they're used specifically for facility improvements. That's the main reason why a lot of cities go that route. The next bond issuance has to do with this project. This project, again, is in the CIP. It is going to happen down at the wastewater treatment plant. There's a lot of background to this project, but essentially, the city was sued a number of years ago because by a legal nonprofit. Or what had happened is that we had a permit where we were allowed to discharge our everything that came out of the plant into the bay under the assumption that that wastewater or that effluent was going out into the ocean. What happened is they did a study that determined that that wasn't actually happening, and that changes the status of our permit. So you go from another category, you go to another category, which is bays and estuaries, and that increases the standard of what you can put in the bay. So we've been working with the State Water Board. They're the agency that issues the permits. This is a long process, but we're hoping that with some of these projects, such as this one, such as the sewer lateral program, that they will essentially approve our permit and allow us to continue discharging into the bay. So the purpose of these projects isn't because we want to do them necessarily, it's because there's legal pressure to improve the wastewater system to avoid having to do something major like piping the water out to the ocean. Or upgrading the plant. These have the potential of costing upwards of $100 million+. So even though these projects might look expensive, it's to avoid potentially even bigger projects in the future.
Wasn't there a Supreme Court case with the EPA and about discharging into waters, Clean Waters Act? It's like the EPA versus the city of San Francisco or something around discharge.
Something to do with it.
I think it was, but that was that's when they come up with the limitations on just how much can be discharged
Yeah,
before it affects the environment.
okay.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that was about 2 years ago.
In San Francisco is
down.
discharges into San Francisco Bay, and the quality of their wastewater is not as good as ours.
Right.
Yeah,
So
right.
sometimes these permits aren't straightforward. Sometimes we have a law firm that has been helping us for years, try to get through these issues.
Now, do you work with the Harbor District and? Because I know they have a lot to do with what comes into the bay.
I mean, given that they have a pipe that goes out to the ocean.
Right.
Yeah, we have to prepare for the worst. So we have had these conversations, but we're hoping with some of these projects that we can continue to discharge.
I was saying they have tidelands around and the city does too.
Yeah,
So there's a lot of
yeah, they're,
working together that you have to.
and we naturally work together on a lot of
Yeah,
efforts.
okay.
So the cost of this project is between 17 and 20 million. The city's portion is 65%. That's because Humboldt Community Services District, who services Myrtletown and Hutton and Humboldt Hill, they also use our treatment plant. So essentially, we charge HCSD 35% of our wastewater treatment plant operations. So the annual debt service payment on this 13 million, or 65% of the total project, would be about $800,000 a year.
Wow.
That's all. Wow.
And how many years?
Yeah, absolutely.
We're be about 30 years.
30.
So when you go out to get that revenue bond, what kind of market is that? Is it volatile right now, or is it?
Great question. So they're known as munis. It's a big portion of, so you, in the stock or in the markets, you have equity. You can buy a portion of a company, or you can buy a company's debt. So in this case, it's debt. And munis are seen as essentially the second best thing. The first best thing is treasury bonds, because the federal government can always pay their debts, so they're seen as risk-free. The second most desirable debt product would be a municipal bond, and that's because those are tax-free, where you don't pay taxes on, or most of the time, you don't have to pay tax on the income from those bonds. Because they're still desirable, you see very little volatility in that market. But that's not to say that when interest rates go up at the federal level, muni rates are going to go up, meaning that the city is going to have to pay more. So if we were, let's say, if we went back in time about 3 or 4 years, we would be looking at a rate that's 1 or 2 percentage points lower. Not a big difference, but we're expecting the rate on these bonds to be about 4 3/4 to 5%. So a few years ago, it might have been 3.5%. The good thing, though, is if rates were to go down, what we can do is a refunding bond. So we can essentially reissue new bonds to pay off the old bonds to capture that lower interest rate.
And can you lock in an interest rate or no?
Yep.
You can? Okay.
It'd be scary if you can.
No, I know, that's what I'm
Couldn't
So in
plan.
actuality, when we get to
Okay.
the issue of the Harbor District and trying to expand that, if we come upon a project we want to go to the state of the feds with, and we can roll that over into one particular revenue bond,
Yeah, or,
roll it over to one.
yeah, you can combine.
Definitely gonna increase our annual debt service by monthly, but in the long run, it's gonna be worthwhile. Are we working with the Harbor District in regards to what we see as any possible improvements on the city's part as well as county and Harbor District?
Even in terms of development.
Yes.
Wind farm or.
Yes,
Right.
Yeah, we're constantly engaging with them. When the county invites the wind farm people, it's usually a joint effort. So our staff work hand in hand, because everyone realizes that we have plenty of space on this side of the bay,
Okay.
and especially coast, or what's it called, industrial specific to the coast. So that's important for the wind farm to be successful over there, is to also utilize space over here. So we see it as much of an opportunity for Eureka as it is for the rest of the community.
so are we seeing any future negotiations with the state to increase our dredging?
The one strategy we've thought of is because you know, you have these companies, these large companies trying to go after the potential of the wind farm.
Mhm.
We're hoping that they would help provide the monies to do the dredging. And in fact, if they were to do a major operation, they would, you know, have large ships come in, so they would need it just as much as us.
Cheaper draft.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, any more private activity on the bay will help with the dredging problem, in my opinion. Yeah, we just want more use, and usually more use means more economic activity, which means more revenues for the municipalities.
I remember back when the Harbor District was really active, when
Right.
we were going through that,
Yeah.
that was a big factor, is having private business. The more business you get in, the easier it would be to continue the dredging.
Yeah.
So it was just a big circle.
Yeah, it just gets more difficult as
Right.
we see less
Right.
activity. But yeah, we are crossing our fingers that the wind farm comes through.
I know.
Are we also soliciting other areas like Oakland and San Francisco in relationship to expanding our ability to storage a lot of those ships that are coming in, to storage their containers out here, like we talked about in the past? Is there discussion with the council or the board of supervisors in regards to approaching the Oakland area?
I'm not aware of any discussion at City Hall. I imagine the Harbor District has those
I
discussions.
hope they are.
I think one of the issues with the storage is having the equipment to unload
Right.
ships.
Right.
I think that's kind of the,
Structure.
Yeah, and it all points to that one Redwood dock over there.
yeah.
Do we have one of our councilmen that are assigned to work in coordination with Harbor District and follow their trend of what they're doing?
Yeah, typically what happens is, so with any other major municipality, whether it's the county or the school district or other districts, we hold what's called a 2x2. So usually two of their board members meets with two of our council members, as well as their executive directors. Yeah, the conversations are ongoing all the time.
Sorry to get off the subject a little bit.
Oh, no.
Appreciate that. Thanks.
Yeah, I used to work in economic development in the city, so I have a lot of this knowledge too. Okay,
Hot subject.
much different subject. We did consider issuing bonds to help with the CalPERS problem, but that's for another day. So I just wanna talk about what the city looked into concerning the unfunded liability. So the city has 3 pension plans. We have one for our police. We have one for everybody that's not a police officer. And then there's a separate new police plan for any officer that was hired after 2013. So each of these plans have a portfolio that is out of balance, meaning that the assets of that portfolio are not enough to pay for the future payments to those employees. And hence you have what's called an unfunded liability. So the reason why this is a big topic for the city as well as the finance department is because of the size of these payments. So this chart captures not only the Eureka unfunded liability future payments, but also our portion of Humboldt Bay Fire. So what happens is every year, the portfolio will either have a gain or a loss. And if there's a gain, then what happens is they build that gain into your liability over time. So your payments don't go down automatically. They might go down over the course of 5 years. In the reverse situation where you have a loss, you're gonna see these payments go up. And again, they're gonna phase them in. So what happens is, if you look at our liability, it's essentially layers that represent every year of performance. So because of that, you get these peaks, or you get it's not a straight line. What ends up happening is if you have a number of bad years, you start to see your payment schedule go up. And unfortunately, what we're facing between now or next fiscal year and fiscal year 3031 is between the city and Humboldt Bay Fire, our total unfunded liability payments will go up by about 1.8 million. It's not guaranteed, but also it's more likely than not to happen. So what I started looking into is avoiding this ramp up. So there's a program called Fresh Start, where essentially what you do is you collapse all of those layers. So you get rid of the phase in, phase out approach. And essentially what happens is you set yourself off on a straight line, which would be good for us because I would avoid this ramp up. And, you know, I would know that my payment for CalPERS is going to remain flat. The bad thing is that when you get out to, you go beyond fiscal year 35, 36, is that that payment would be elevated even though the blue line is going below. That would be great, but you know, I don't need the savings 10 years from now. I'd prefer the savings right now. So what I did was I proposed a payment plan that would look like this. They determined that it wasn't, so what you have to show is savings. You can't just kick the can on your debt. You have to show interest savings so that you're not making the municipality pay even more. This plan wasn't up to their standards, and they came back and said, actually, we can hold you at 8.5 million per year. The problem with that is that would, you know, we'd quickly escalate about $1 million next fiscal year. And then again, I would be paying more than the current schedule. And then we would even out in 27, 28. But then when I projected out the impact on our reserves in the general fund, the blue bar is doing what's called the fresh start. The orange is just keeping things status quo. That in the next 5 years, I would actually be better off keeping the status quo. And I felt that given the current economic environment, that it was probably better to keep the money in the bank for a while and to continue to analyze this problem and to see if there's any other strategies that the city can use. So I will continue to look at different strategies in terms of selecting certain layers to collapse together. That's an option. But a lot of this, you have to use actuaries. So it's not something we can do in-house. I have to work with an outside firm to determine the best approach.
What are, because I know that all over throughout the state, what are some of the other entities doing to combat this ballooning?
What I've noticed is a lot of cities like to pay additional payments. Just like you pay, like if you have a mortgage and you pay more, you pay down your principal. That's not a bad strategy if you have extra.
If you have it.
Yeah, if you have extra cash, it's not a bad idea. There are reasons why you wouldn't want to do that. And mainly that's because, let's say the city woke up and I had 10 million extra dollars in our bank account. If I were to put or pay down our debt, or pay down the debt by 10 million all at once, and then that year CalPERS has a loss, then I have a loss on that investment I just made.
Yep.
So really what you'd want to do is break up those payments over time to reduce the volatility in the CalPERS portfolio. The other thing that cities do is they do pension bonds, which exacerbates what I just mentioned. They decide to go and get bond monies to pay off their debt. But here we're talking about $60 million. So if I were to get $60 million and then invest it or pay off the debt, and then CalPERS has a bad year, then even though I just paid off the debt, the following year I'm gonna have another unfunded liability. The Arcata Fire Agency did this, and that's exactly
Yeah,
what
that's
happened.
what happened.
Yeah, we were doing it at the same time, but we decided to back out because what had happened was the war in Ukraine started, and that's when interest rates started to shoot up. And that's the thing that you have to predict is what our interest rate's gonna do, and that's, nobody can do that,
Yeah.
so. And with rates upwards of, 5% or 4 to 5%, those pension bonds don't really pencil out. When rates were, as low as 2.5%, then that strategy is more viable.
So that chart assumes like a flat market or,
That chart assumes that CalPERS will return an average of 6.8% every year for eternity.
okay, so this chart just assumes that.
Yeah.
Flat market for CalPERS. So if they do better or worse, it changes.
And they do better than their benchmark over time.
Yeah.
But yeah, so
And then how quickly, if they do worse, does that graph change?
if they start underperforming, let's just say they're doing 5% instead of 68.8%, what you would start to see is this peak would just keep
Right.
getting pushed.
Okay,
That's what.
so it just spreads out or lengthens that curve.
So if
So if they do better, it comes in tighter, right? It would come down quicker.
yeah, it starts.
And then if they do worse, it's gonna widen out. Okay,
Okay, so we're just gonna go over the big numbers for the three major operations. So sorry, in the accounting system, revenues are shown as a negative number, and that's parentheses, so I think it can get confusing even for myself.
Yeah, that for me.
So we did make a couple changes between the study session and what's going on the agenda next week. So what happened is we removed the effects of the Fresh Start plan, which actually improved the deficit. But we added a sergeant position to the police department. So essentially it netted to zero. So this number prior to those changes was about 765,000. So you can see it, we're right about the same. Or, there wasn't much change overall. And the one thing I didn't mention for the CalPERS Fresh Start program is that what we were looking to do was actually make some upfront payments to help lower those interest costs. So that was gonna essentially lower what we had in reserves. So now we're starting with a larger number of our beginning fund balance. So fund balance is another word for reserves.
Okay, that's what I was.
And we have a policy that we adopted a couple years ago that says that our goal is to hold 25% of our expenditures in reserve. So you can see even with this deficit that will reduce fund balance, but will still be above the policy level.
and do these expenditures include the annual debt service for the bonds that we?
Yes, and you
Talked about.
wouldn't see a line item that said debt service yet. So we have two budget policies that hold us to a certain level of street improvement spending as well as facility improvement spending. So we have so our goal every year is to commit $2 million from the general fund to improve our streets. in addition to about 1.4 million from the state. So every year, we plan on doing about 3.4 million in street projects. For facility projects, that threshold is $1 million. So right now, we've been using between $500,000 and $1 million just for random facility projects. But once those bonds are in place, that $1 million will be dedicated to paying the debt service payment, with the remainder being used for just emergency projects that come up.
Okay, so this has the 900,000 that the general fund will pay for the $2 million
Yes.
revenue lease or whatever, lease bond already baked in.
Yeah, once we go to market and I get the schedule of principal versus interest payments, then I'll break them out. So you'll actually see within the line item the total principal and total interest per year.
And it's loaded to like hit in like January, for like starting January, because I imagine not gonna happen on 7/1.
It could be as soon as November.
Okay,
When we get
but
to
but
market.
it's shaped to have that, or is it shaped to start like July 1?
I think they would see well, at this point, we wouldn't get to market until July at the earliest. The first year would get adjusted, the interest portion would get adjusted, so it wouldn't be that full 9 million. But the following year would be 9 million
Or 900,000?
or 900, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's true.
I'm just saying, in this budget, does it
Yeah.
assume
Oh, it's
whatever,
the full payment.
it assumes 12 months, or whatever 900,000 divided by 12 is, starting July 1?
Well, essentially, I just set aside that million because it's really just a placeholder.
Okay,
So every year, you're gonna see $1 million set aside for facility projects, and that's.
so that's what's in here.
Yeah, so you,
Okay.
actually, we might see savings
Right.
because that's more than what we need.
Just trying to figure out if there's like, $400,000 in savings or so, because it's not actually gonna start paying out until, December or January or something. And it's just,
Yeah, you're technically right that, yeah, when I when I accrue interest at the end of next fiscal year, it's not gonna be 900,000, it's gonna be a ratio.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
and just to make sure that I understand that that's not, it's not a $700,000 loss plus things that we didn't factor in, like everything is factored in of those bond payments.
yes, so I
Been there, okay.
And I make sure, at least on the expenditure side, that I capture every single possibility.
Okay, yeah.
I don't.
This is like worst case scenario.
Yeah, revenues, I'm not as my strategy with revenues is not that.
More
Because
conservative.
I want surprises here.
Yeah.
Positive surprises.
Right.
And I want a positive surprise to be savings.
Right,
Yeah.
That's helped me get to here, so.
great, yeah.
Explain that. So I've also done some forecasts for the general fund. Forecasts are a good practice. Will things actually end up like this? Who knows? My last forecast didn't account for the pandemic, so who knows what can happen.
Oh, really?
Didn't figure it out.
So right now it does show that we have a structural deficit, meaning that we expect it to reoccur. I would not call this significant. It's less than 1% of our spending. And typically, because of how we budget, even though we start with a deficit, it doesn't mean we'll end with a deficit. A good example is the current fiscal year. We started off showing a 1.1 or $1 million deficit. And I actually expect a surplus of about $800,000. So, it could be worse, but also, we might not see this happen. The good thing is, even next or 2 years from now, we'll still be at that policy
25%.
level. And then hopefully this doesn't happen, but again, with enough time, you can manage your way out of these
But your
situations.
pleasant surprises will help.
Yes, yeah, I did, my first forecast was back in 2016-17. And I just pulled that up last night. And what we were showing back then was these percentages were like 9% and 6%. So we've been very lucky.
Mhm.
Um, okay, next I have the water fund. So for fiscal year 25-26, we expect about 13.2 million in revenue. We only plan to spend about 13 million, so we're showing a small surplus. Currently, the beginning fund balance is roughly 3.5 million. That should grow to about 3.6 million, or 28% of expenditures.
And you're looking for the same 25%.
We don't actually have the same policy for the water
Oh,
wastewater
okay.
fund.
Okay.
Not that that's not a good benchmark for this fund. The financial management of both the utilities is a little bit different because what we do are studies. So about every 5 years, we hire an outside consultant, an expert on utility systems or water and wastewater systems. They work with our engineering staff as well as finance, and they essentially look at what the system needs. And then they determine what your rate structure should be to achieve those improvements that you need to do. So whenever you're looking at the wastewater system, your best way to gauge performance is to essentially pull up that rate study and to compare where we're at today with where the rate study thought we would be. So in this case, the rate study benchmark assumed that we would be at about 6.2 million. So that might look bad. But the one thing that we didn't do that we thought we would do when we developed the rate study was when during the rate study, we determined that we needed to upgrade our meters for water and sewer meters. They had gone past their useful life. A lot of them were failing. We couldn't pick up reads. So we assumed that we would go out to debt for about $6 million to pay for those new meters, as well as the installation of those meters. What ended up happening was we did not use a third party to do the replacement. We did it in-house, and it ultimately cost the city about $3.5 million. So we avoided issuing debt, and we got that project cost way down. The impact was our fund balance. Here we have the wastewater fund. Total revenue about 15.3 million, and then expenditures 15.1. Again, showing a surplus, which is good. Beginning fund balance is roughly 11.4, growing to about 11.6 next year. Percentage of expenditures is quite high.
Oh, I have a question on the wastewater fund.
Question. So the wastewater, the rate study assumed about 9.3 at that point. So obviously we're doing much better. But the rate study did not assume that we would do the sewer lateral program. So what happens with that program is that if a property exchanges hands or there's a transaction, the current owners or the new owners have to replace the sewer lateral, both the upper section, which goes from the sidewalk to the house, but they also have to pay an lieu fee to cover the cost of the lower section, which essentially connects lateral that's on the property to the lateral that connects to the main sewer pipe. So it's been a very popular program.
I saw,
Especially with real
Yes.
well, so I saw, I think
myself.
a bid that went through to the city council. And I think in the presentation, and my numbers might be a little bit wrong, it said that the bid was gonna cost like 1.1 million. And the in lieu fee offset was 900,000. And so the city was still picking up about $200,000 of the bill.
So we're still working that out, but
Okay,
the
is that
program-
ring true? Is like, does my memory seem, if the numbers are a little wishy, whatever?
No, you're very close.
Okay.
The intent the whole time was the city would cover 80% of that cost.
Oh, wait. The city would cover 80%?
I'm sorry, no,
That's not,
it's the inverse of that. So we covered 20% of the cost.
okay.
So we, I think the sewer, lieu fee was like 8,000
Yeah.
for a while.
Yeah.
So we assumed the project or connecting a house would be about 10,000.
Okay.
And there's a lot of what are considered standard, but there's a lot that are not considered standard. So a lot of the issues are around trying to balance both. Because if committing to 80% of the standard is a lot easier than what's called a non-standard,
Mhm.
which could be going through someone else's property or connected to multiple other houses. Yes, we are trying to keep the costs as low as possible without growing that subsidy.
I just feel like it's an important like narrative to get out there that like, this is costing the city money. Because I feel like a lot of people think like, oh, I'm getting ripped off, or oh, the city's gonna make money on this somehow. But I didn't know that the city expected to pay 20% of it. I had just always known that there was some kind of in lieu fee. And when I saw that report come out, I was like, oh, that's interesting. This whole system is costing the city $200,000 to get this done.
Yeah, they like to present it as the net amount.
Right, exactly. And then all of that activity is wrapped up in here, right?
Correct. So the reason why we have more than what we thought we had is because the money comes in faster than we can go out and replace the laterals. So that is, I don't think that's gonna change here because, we can't do construction all year long. So what you'll see is the money will build up and then it'll get spent. And I think that will continue to happen. But currently we have about 1.6 million that we have not spent. Because there's so much interest and for good reason in this program. What I'm gonna do in the next few months is isolate all of the sewer lateral activity into its own fund. And it should make it very easy for people to monitor what we're taking in versus what we're spending. In addition to that, the city has a loan program where we cover, or you can get a 10-year loan at a rate of 2.5%, which is technically a subsidy.
Yeah.
So we understand that this can be difficult. And we're sensitive to the fact that it can put a real estate transactions are already hard.
But that would have to be factored into the new buyer taking on that obligation.
The previous owner doesn't want to pay that 2.5%. They want out of the deal.
Right.
Right.
So
So it has to be transferable.
a lot of times it's a negotiating.
Negotiated, yeah.
So the 1.6 million that's gonna be segregated into its own fund, are those funds also segregated on like a bank level?
No, I don't. You don't separate. When I first started, I thought you would have an account for every.
No, yeah. I'm just wondering, like, the interest that the city of Eureka makes off of that 1.6 million, if it's in an interest earning fund. Is there something that we could do
Oh, as an additional subsidy.
as an additional subsidy?
Yeah, that would be fairly easy to. Everything in that fund balance is essentially, the money's working, for the fund.
Yeah, would just be interesting to take like that, right, the in lieu fee.
Yeah.
And use the interest earned off of that as some sort of,
Additional, that's like a great idea.
and it's something we could offer, right? So let's say we're earning 4%, then, maybe, half of that income could go to some kind of, application process for people to lower their fee or something.
I'll
We're into the reserve account.
Well,
Yeah.
but the reserve account is already above the rate study
It is.
benchmark, you know, and
Yeah.
so,
That's right.
is it a priority to like increase the reserves, or is it a
Right.
priority to like make this seem like less of a terrible thing that people have
Yes.
to go through?
And it's
Even
highly
though
controversial.
It's
Yeah,
so
I
much
know.
better for the wastewater treatment plant to not have,
Yeah.
Effluent going into it all the time
Right.
because the
Right.
sewer lateral were cracked. You know,
Okay, thank
Yeah,
you.
and a couple years when we do another rate study, it's another opportunity to look at the world differently. So this thing's gonna be handled.
But other cities are doing under the same obligation. Arcadia went through this too, right?
Yeah, I think this has been a problem since cities had wastewater treatment plants.
Yeah.
'Cause my parents told me that when I was
Mhm.
born, that they had to get off septic
Right.
and, for lateral. Yeah, this is part of the lawsuit, or the response to the lawsuit is doing this program.
right,
So it's difficult for us because it's not like we want to be doing this, but it clearly is a benefit to the system overall. Because any additional, anything extra going into the sewer system, there's costs associated to treating, stormwater, so.
yeah. Well, and if you have root intrusion, then you just have groundwater intrusion
Mhm.
into the system, and then you're just moving groundwater through the wastewater treatment plant, which
Right.
doesn't make any sense because
Right.
it's not wastewater.
Yeah, and with our wet winters, it's already hard.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
I think someone keeps trying to take control of your,
I know, it looks like.
there. Okay, last section.
yeah, it's weird.
So my thought was to establish 4 meetings. 3 make a lot of sense to me, the 4th, not so sure. But in September is the last month that we keep the current fiscal year open. So because we wait on a lot of tax revenue and a lot of invoices from contractors. We technically don't close the books until September. But by the end of September, I have all my final numbers for the current fiscal year. So I figured around October would be a good time to reconvene. So I could show you what actually happened in the current fiscal year. Then we get to the winter time, and usually around February, we do what's called the mid-year process. So departments, or finance department, can look at their budget and they determine if they need more money. They also shift money around from line item to line item. So that would be another event that I think would be of interest to the FAC. And then obviously in the springtime, we do our annual budget process. So it's really, do we have 2 for the budget? Or do we come up with a new topic? Or do we go with 3 meetings? And then is it better for everybody to have the same date, time every quarter? Or do we want to decide every quarter?
Question.
For the 4th one, I mean, the city, I imagine, participates in an audit every year.
Oh, that's a good idea.
When is the audit get wrapped up for the prior fiscal year?
Yeah, that's a good.
Even if it's later, right? It would be interesting to see the results of the city audit for the finance advisory.
Yeah,
You'll probably wrap it up in like February. So, and even if
it
we,
depends on the auditor's schedule.
okay,
There's a hard deadline, that's the end of March.
right,
Because if you get enough federal dollars, you have to do an additional financial statement. There's a due date on that one.
I mean,
We could do both.
if it's wrapped up in March, right, and then you bring us it in, I don't know, August, it would still be interesting to see.
Maybe.
I agree.
Is I think what I'm saying,
Yeah, maybe if we did a March and then a May for the budget.
sure,
That would be,
Yeah, things are in stone.
Makes sense.
And then is there a certain day of the week or time of day that is preferred?
I just don't want to have it be a Thursday because I'm already committed to the Open Space Commission on Thursday.
Only the last Thursday,
Huh? The
last Thursday of the month.
Right. Because we can't have it be that.
We shouldn't be scheduling meetings when there's other meetings. We try not to do that. This is just a
Good.
fluke. So
I like the 5 o'clock. Works good for me, but I don't know. Is it hard for you? Because you're-
Oh, that's-
or-
I
yeah,
work.
It has to
Yeah,
be
he
5 o'clock
works.
because we have local businessmen, you're still in business, right? It's gotta be after 5 o'clock.
Yeah.
5 o'clock or after.
I'm not.
Okay,
But I think that the sooner we have the dates, the better.
Yeah.
I travel a lot, I'm gone a lot, and so I can forecast when I need to be back here and plan my life around that. I don't know about everybody else, but it's easier to have a date in the future.
If we could do like 5:30, that would work better for me.
Yeah.
And then I usually have
Sure.
other meetings on Tuesdays. So Tuesdays are the only day that aren't great for me. Other days.
So it sounds like Wednesday,
Wednesday's
Sounds like-
good.
Wednesdays usually work, yeah.
Wednesday at 5:30 sounds like the best.
because even the first Wednesday of the month, we have historic preservation, but it starts at 4. The second is planning commission. The third is economic development every other month. So we should be able to plan around that easily.
Great.
Yeah, if you don't mind using this room.
I don't have to.
No,
This is fine.
what's wrong with this room?
Yeah.
You don't have
I actually like it
microphones.
'cause I
It
like
was before.
We don't need them.
I don't think we need microphones.
Yeah,
Yeah, I like more of a Q&A. kind
I like this better. Yeah.
of-
Yeah, I like,
I also have a goal of handing a lot of this off to my staff. I will certainly come back. So in the
Introduce
future.
Susanna.
Oh, I'm sorry, this is Suzanne. This is one of our accountants.
Hello,
Uh,
nice to meet you.
In the finance department, we have 2 accountants. One is off on maternity leave. So
We have one right
she's
now.
handling the books for this part right now.
Good luck with that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your work.
Sounds like fun.
It is.
So yeah, you'll get to meet more of the finance staff in the future. Okay, well, I think what we'll do is, next week we'll send out some dates, so that we can plan ahead. And then I'll put the theme of the meeting next to the date. And if you have any ideas or in the future, if you want to know more about any subject, really, just give us a heads up and I'll do my best to report or even bring in other coworkers.
And 2 kind of wrap-up questions is, we don't historically take action on anything, but it has action here in the agenda.
Yeah, the idea was you want to recommend 25-26 budget to council.
But do we even have that power?
You can send the chair.
It'd be a recommend.
Yeah, we've done it before.
Okay.
Yeah, we did it previous years.
Yeah.
And then my other question was, has Carol been sworn in? Did you guys do that?
Good question.
and it doesn't matter that I'm already sworn in.
Does not matter, no. And I have it on my desk too.
Oh,
So she was sworn in already?
no, I was
Christine?
sworn in, because I'm on the Open Space Commission. So I was
Okay.
sworn in for that, but not for this one.
I think she'd have to be sworn in for this.
Separate.
She does.
Yeah,
Oh, since we're not voting on anything, except for
Okay.
the minutes
The
approving,
minutes thing, that's.
but there's 5 of you, so
But-
4 of you is still
Yeah,
approval.
right.
Yeah.
So-
So,
Just for the minutes.
thank you.
That it's not quite a fully seated member yet.
That's fine.
Believe me, we'll get that.
I still ask the question.
No, it was great. No.
thank you. Appreciate you bringing that to your attention.
So we're looking at a 5:30. We decided on that
Yeah, that's
and
fine.
probably a Wednesday, sounds like. Okay.
Yeah,
Which is good.
which is nice because I had a JP or a Humboldt Fire meeting that are always on Wednesday at 4:30, so
Hmm.
5:30 would
Oh,
Better.
allow me to stay in.
Great. Really appreciate your presentation.
Yeah,
Very well done.
Thank you.
I'm still gonna get used to the parentheses and
Yeah, sometimes I
on the,
switch the numbers around, but that's just
I
more
think the first
formatting.
meeting I
Sometimes
went,
Excel
what?
does
You know,
that.
Why don't we do a motion to accept the the budget as presented?
You have to call for public comment first, even though there's no public comment. Even though there's no public here, we still have to call for it if you're taking a vote on something.
Okay, thank
So-
you very much. Okay, so we'll call for the, any public comment in regards to the accepting the budget for 2025 through the Fiscal Advisory Board Committee. No one speaks up? Thank you. Okay. So I'll present to the table a motion to accept the budget as presented by Elaine. All those in favor?
Have to
So
second.
we have a motion.
A motion first. Thank you. Motion.
I'll move to accept and recommend the proposed FY 25-26 budget.
Thank you. Second,
Second.
second by Dennis.
Make it faster.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passed. Thank you.
Thank you.
You know, I would recommend, on behalf of other business, those members that aren't here, I guess it would only be
Jack.
Jack.
And Chris Byfield.
Yes, send them a letter in regards to,
I told him I would link I told Chris, because I heard from him that I would link the meeting to him as
Okay.
soon as we had it released.
but you've done that with Jack already.
I keep trying with Jack. I still have never actually talked to him, but I try.
See him once in a while.
I'm not sure what else we can do there.
If I see him, I'll remind.
Try to stick.
I've done that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Says you're gonna take it.
you can only miss so many meetings before they effectively remove you from the
Okay.
board, so.
But then we could consider having this be a 5-member board as well.
It's just something you have to change your bylaws. You have to change your bylaws. To go from 7 to 5 or
Yeah.
however that works.
Yeah, that's probably too difficult.
Yeah, I know. That's-
Not really.
Yeah, we
We
did it
just
with,
needed
Just
open-
did it with, yeah.
Just need it on the agenda for next meeting, I
we just
imagine.
did it with Open Space Commission.
So we have this committee has bylaws?
Yeah, we have like a charter.
There's a charter.
Okay.
It's not
Yeah.
too detailed, but
No, it's like 3 pages.
Guess we could just continue to try and reach
You
out.
guys would like me to find the bylaws for you so you can all see what they say?
Yeah, that, I was
Yeah.
gonna ask, because
I haven't looked at them.
Sure.
Cheers.
that'd be a good idea.
Very good, thank you. Any other business?
We're done.
There a motion to adjourn the meeting?
You don't have to motion, but 6:11.
All of us.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Okay, I'll get you in a minute.
Thank you.
Thank you for running the meeting.
Yeah, it's great.
I'm so.
So then